Why does Central Asia matter? Central Asia is a landlocked set of countries. Only about 1% of the world's population lives in the region. It is geographically remote, with harsh terrain and weather, with large swaths of uninhabitable land. So, why should the Navy be interested in the landlocked region of the world? What are the United States' strategic interests in Central Asia? This is the subject of my brief talk in this video. My name is Dr. Suzanne Levi Sanchez, and I am an associate professor in the Department of National Security Affairs at the United States Naval War College. Today's talk explains why we should care about Central Asia. If you are interested in learning more about the background and history of Central Asia, including about the Great Game and Silk Road, I have created a deeper dive into the region in a separate video. The following outlines the key strategic issues in Central Asia relevant to the United States. There are energy resources, challenges related to legacy WMDs, the environment, borders, rising ethno-nationalism, narcotics trafficking, terrorism concerns, human rights issues, and great power competition. All of these challenges highlight why Central Asia is of strategic importance to the US. First, there are significant energy and mineral resources in Central Asia. Pipelines represent the physical creation of national interests, and China is very focused on what these pipelines mean for broader international relations in the region. China has a bilateral agreement with each state in Central Asia along the routes to its region, holding each state directly accountable for continuous, successful transit. Kazakhstan has been the most successful Central Asian state at developing diversification of routes because it has developed routes that have both the infrastructure and the political agreements necessary to keep that infrastructure in use. Consider, by contrast, Turkmenistan. It has pipelines to Russia, Iran, and China, but at the moment, only the Chinese line is being used anywhere near its capacity. The dotted lines show proposed pipelines, and the red lines show the existing pipelines. It is clear by the pipelines that China is a large consumer of Central Asian oil and gas. In fact, Turkmenistan is almost completely dependent on China for its gas exports at this time. There are significant oil reserves, not to mention a large reserve of other rare minerals. There's significant and underdeveloped oil in the region of Central Asia, with Kazakhstan having the 12th largest reserves in the world. China views Kazakhstan as integral to its energy security, since Central Asia as a whole has 4% of global energy reserves. BP estimates gas reserves of Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan could be among the world's largest. Turkmenistan has the 6th largest gas reserves in the world, making Central Asia a major player in the gas industry. The Central Asia-China gas pipeline connects Turkmenistan to Uzbekistan to Kazakhstan to Xinjiang, and from there, this pipeline connects from Khorgos to Hong Kong. China is also a major buyer of uranium from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, as is India. Mismanagement of water issues in Central Asia, largely due to lack of cooperation and foresight, has led to one of the worst environmental disasters in the world, which is the drying up of the Aral Sea, the largest saline lake on the globe. The Aral Sea is fed by the Amu Darya and Sir Darya. In 1953, Khrushchev began his Virgin Land program. This diverted water flowing to the Aral Sea for agriculture, which included cotton, which was referred to as white gold at the time. The water was also diverted for rice, wheat, and melon crops. The Central Asian republics, and in particular Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, were referred to as the Soviet Union's breadbasket. The problem was diverting the water from the Aral Sea slowly dried up this large saline lake and caused a profound ecological disaster. There are border issues and rising ethno-nationalism in Central Asia. This map shows the various ethnic groups in the region. As you can see, many of them span the borders in the region. When the Soviets created the Central Asian republics, the borders cut through ethnically homogeneous areas, creating competition among groups within each republic. These divisions have been the main driver of intrastate and interstate conflict since the fall of the Soviet Union. Over the past few years, the ethnic groups that hold power at the state level have become increasingly more oppressive, both economically and socially. Currently, in fact, in Central Asia, there is a recent steep rise in ethno-nationalism by those in power, including oppression of the Uzbeks in southern Kyrgyzstan, Tajiks in southern Uzbekistan and other areas, and the Ismailis and Pamiris in eastern Tajikistan, to name a few. This has led to serious human rights issues. One of the ways Central Asia tries to keep a lid on extremism is by keeping tight control of religious freedoms, limiting freedom of speech, the press, assembly, and generally restricting civil liberties. In recent years, authorities in all of the Central Asian republics have cracked down on minority ethnic groups and/or religious groups and communities, which has led to a number of bloody conflicts in the region. These conflicts are most often ethnically based. As a whole, Central Asian countries are weak states with oppressive authoritarian governments, meaning they have a top-down, heavy-handed control with weak institutions, rule of law, and social services. This leads to small family networks, often referred to as clans, controlling the majority of resources and the economies. Because of these tight-knit familial networks and the ways in which this forms almost mafia-style loyalty pacts, corruption drives most of the transactions within the country's economy. The sprawling security apparatus within each country reaches into the lives of every citizen and drives the ability of the authoritarian leaders and their families to control most aspects of social and economic life within each country. Citizens create counter networks as a means to gain access to resources in the economy, which further weakens the corruption networks and spills into the extensive trafficking networks that flow through the region. Narcotics trafficking fuels many of the economies in Central Asia. Many analysts report that 1/4 of the opium and heroin produced in Afghanistan transits through Central Asia to markets in Russia and Central Europe. This map shows the main routes out of Afghanistan and the approximate amount of heroin that traffics through the region. Given the amount of heroin that is grown and processed in Afghanistan, it consists of approximately 90% of the world's heroin supply. This multi-billion-dollar industry in the region makes each of these states forms of rentier economies, sometimes referred to as narco economies, based on black markets and illicit trade. The United States Office of Drug and Crime recently reported that trafficking has been steadily increasing in the region since 2012. More worrying is the recent and rapidly evolving production of methamphetamines in Afghanistan. The local plant ephedra grows easily and rapidly in the country, and meth labs are popping up all over the place. It is thought that the meth is beginning to traffic along the same networks as the heroin and opium trade, which will only add to the endemic bribery and corruption that already exists through the region, as well as the billions of dollars flowing to elite families from the northern route as the narcotics travel through the region to Russian and European networks. There are also concerns about terrorism. The presence of ISIS, homegrown terrorist groups, and Al-Qaeda affiliates are often of concern to the US and allies, as well as China and Russia. There are foreign fighters from Central Asia and Afghanistan, and concern that they'll return home from Afghanistan after they finish fighting there. In recent years, there have been attacks in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Fighters from Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Tajikistan are also in Syria. As one ex-DEA agent told me, approximately 250 kilograms of opium and heroin cross the northern Afghan border into Tajikistan daily. So when a little drug dealer gets caught with 25 kilograms on the border, Tajikistan often advertises this as a huge bust, but it's only 10% of one day's load. In economic terms, if 1 kilogram of Afghan heroin goes for 100,000 US dollars on the Russian street, imagine the amount of 250 kilograms flowing through the region per day. This windfall of cash funds Iran's IRGC operations, various terrorist groups, governments, and large conglomerate networks throughout Central Asia and beyond. Central Asia is located directly in the middle of China's Belt Road Initiative and is an integral part of China's March West strategy. It is also part of China's broader strategy to connect Central Asia and its own Western territories to maritime trade routes. If you look at this map, it shows that while Central Asia is a landlocked region, it also has important linkages to the maritime space. The maritime component along the new Silk Road intersects with the new great game in the region, namely the competition between China and India for port supremacy and maritime access to the landlocked regions. The competition is playing out in the ports of Chabahar and Gwadar. Here's a close-up view of the two ports and their land routes to the Ring Road in Afghanistan. India is helping Iran develop the port of Chabahar, and China has been funding development of the port of Gwadar in Pakistan. As you can see, the Strait of Hormuz is very close to the port of Chabahar as well. So while Central Asia is landlocked, their neighbors are not. And this new great game is playing out among great powers for access to the mineral and resource-rich Central Asian countries. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor connects Gwadar in southern Pakistan to China's northwestern autonomous region of Xinjiang. It's approximately 3,000 kilometers from Gwadar to Kashgar. The construction costs are already over $46 billion. This corridor is a key extension of China's proposed 21st century Silk Road Initiative and one they have been aggressively pursuing and funding. Part of the reason for the importance of this port is the ability to transport oil and gas. As part of this initiative, they also are developing highways and pipelines to transport this oil and gas. So how and why do all of these issues matter to the United States? Should terrorism in Central Asia be of national interest for the US? Is Chinese development of transit systems in the region of concern to US national security? Is Turkmenistan's dependence on Chinese for its gas exports important? Should the US be concerned about border insecurity and ethno-nationalism in Central Asia and the border of Afghanistan? Is the Aral Sea environmental disaster a national security issue for the US? What about narcotics trafficking and the rapid rise of addiction and HIV in Central Asia? Does it matter that Russian and Chinese influence and military buildup in Central Asia are rapidly increasing? What about maritime competition for Central Asia through the ports of Gwadar and Chabahar? These are all questions for debate and discussion. There are no clear answers, just choices. What do you think are vital interests for the US in Central Asia? This is the end of my brief overview of Central Asia and the Central Asian countries. Thank you for listening.